This episode of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine was made possible by contributions from slaves like you. Thank you very much.
A lot of people involved in the Black Bloc on Saturday, many of them 6 months ago were members of the Labour Party, working for the Liberal Democrat Party, people who really believed back then that parliamentary democracy could work for them, and now they believe that it's not going to work for them.
It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
Good morning, slaves, and welcome to another edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine, the show where all our heroes wear masks.
Go ninja, go ninja, go! 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 Go, 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 go!
I am your host, the Stimulator, and with global May Day protests and the Occupy wave of actions coming up, I thought it would be nice to do a little segment about the tactic of tactics. The cancer in Chris Hedges' colon.
Too big to fail, big enough to fall!
The most widespread and mimicked street formation of the last 6,000 years. And the craze that has police departments and politicians wetting their dockers. Yep.
The Black Bloc.
But what about Madrid?
You're a right, agitator. I must first pay my respects to our lion-hearted peeps in Madrid who daringly attacked the fuzz during anti-austerity protests last month.
The underpinnings of this movement are confrontational and radical.
Many people out there think that the Black Bloc is a gang or crew that one can join.
The radical group called the Black Bloc anarchists openly brag about using terrorist-type tactics.
There are no Black Bloc anarchists, you dick no shit rocket. The Black Bloc is simply a fucking tactic.
Black Bloc is not a group or a social movement. It's simply a tactic used by protesters to protect themselves from police aggression and express a complete rejection of capitalism.
Tactics are techniques used for securing objectives and are part of a strategy or plan of action.
Like the tactic of blockading a street. The blockade is used with the objective of stopping police or industry traffic into an area that you are trying to hold or protect, and could be part of an overall strategy to protect a forest or autonomous zone, for example. The Black Bloc tactic can be used for the purpose of securing streets, with the strategic goal of creating autonomous spaces for dissent within the context of intense police repression. It can also be used to attack corporate and state infrastructure, allowing the saboteurs to remain anonymous. This tactic has spread around the world like wildfire, and we have witnessed its prowess in places such as Turkey, Egypt, Brazil, and Colombia. So, to find out more about the history of the Black Bloc, I bring you Francis Dupuy-Derry, a motherfucking anarchist and author of Who's Afraid of the Black Blocs. Hey Francis, how the fuck are you?
I don't know.
When was the tactic of Black Bloc first deployed?
The Black Bloc, the way we know it, appeared the first time in Germany, in West Berlin, at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. The first time the term Black Bloc was coined in Germany was in 1980. And it was in what was called at the time the Autonomen movement mainly of squatters, political squatters, who were involved in a protest against the nuclear industries, the nuclear weapons, and the neo-fascist movement in Germany. So at the time in Germany, they were wearing a leather jacket. That was what was fashionable at the time. So black leather jacket, black motorcycle helmet, and they were merging in Black Bloc to get a mass of anonymous people, because you can't recognize people in a homogeneous mass of people wearing black and mask. And they were using this tactic to confront the police, fight against the police which was coming to expose them from their squats, for instance, or to fight against neo-Nazis in the streets.
In the description of your book, Who's Afraid of the Black Blocs, it states that the image of the window-smashing thug hides a complex reality. Can you fucking explain?
Too often the Black Bloc is described by politicians, by police officers, by journalists, by scholars even, as something really not interesting from a political point of view. They are described as a bunch of hooligans and as apolitical individuals who just like to riot, like to smash things without any political rationale.
The Black Bloc, which are primarily white, sort of nihilistic, destructive, embracing sort of confusing petty vandalism and this repellent sort of cynicism with revolution.
And of course, when you listen to them, when you watch them in action, when you look at them, when you follow them, and when you try to understand what they do in Germany, in France, in Great Britain, in Greece, in Brazil, you rapidly understand that it's only about politics.
I heard 50,000 other people were going to be here, and I figured even if they're out here protesting in a way that I don't like, advocating reform or abolition of some particular institution, at least there are 50,000 people that really care and are worked up about something, and hopefully we can come out here and give them a shove in a little more radical direction.
About politics, about economics, of course, also about power relationship, about domination, and it's a way to express a radical criticism of these systems, the state system, the capitalist system, the bank system, and their targets. What the target is the message. It's what they target that give us the meaning of their action.
Thanks, Francis. Stay tuned after the break for an interview with a Montreal street fighter.
Sortir du silence comme d'un abcès, trouver l'écho, laisser la folie exploser, ignorer là-bas, aller droit à l'opposé, compter parler le fracas, alerte rouge, parce que le bleu me rend malade, un rouge profond et dense à la mesure de la primade, alerte rouge, parce que le rose est bien trop fade, mais rouge comme la couleur des théâtres et barricades. Car s'ils savaient ce que je pense de leur mode d'emploi, leur façon de nous la faire à l'envers et à l'endroit, leur fin sera mon début, c'est bien normal qu'on reste en froid. Je crache mes brûlots de prolo puis disparais après l'envoi. Et j'attends le sabotage, je peux gripper la machine, imprévu le coup du sort, faire valser le décor, je veux dégraisser le bord, puis redresser les chines, inverser la vapeur et voir la peur changer de bord, urgent crier. Urgent crier.
Viewers of this fucking show know that in 2012, thousands of people took part in a 6-month insurrection in Montreal. What is popularly known as the Maple Spring began as a student strike, but evolved into a popular revolt that included many sectors of society. The sheer fucking number of protesters and the non-stop use of militant street tactics exhausted not only the cops, but also their budget. Since then, the Montreal Popo have smartened up and have consistently kettled anti-capitalist demonstrations as a way to avoid a repeat of 2012. This year, comrades have been having conversations as to how to regain the street power that was obtained on that insurrectionary moment. So, to revisit some of the tactics used in the battles of that year, I bring you Nick, a university student involved in much of the street fighting in 2012. But first, a fucking disclaimer.
The voice of Nick has been replaced with that of a voice actor to protect their identity. Also, some of the footage used to illustrate Nick's experience will not necessarily be from Montreal. This video is meant for entertainment purposes only, much like a sex toy or a novelty whoopee cushion.
So, enough of that noise. Hey Nick, how the fuck are you?
I'm feeling great.
So, how the fuck does street fighting progress in Montreal?
From the beginning of the strike, we saw the use of masks go from being an isolated practice to something that became normal for hundreds of people to do. This explosion in the use of masks wasn't magical. It took anarchists consistently masking up and explaining why they mask up in flyers and conversations. The same can be said for attacks against police. As the strike progressed, the isolated attacks on police that characterized the demos during the beginning of the strike, such as a couple of rocks thrown in their direction, eventually became more popular to do, up to the point where demos sometimes became very uncontrollable for hours. This was simply a matter of persistence.
Fuck! Holy shit.
as people continue to see masked up street fighters getting away with attacking the pigs who had been clubbing them for weeks. They started to see themselves as capable of acting conflictually as well. I imagine that this involved many different groups of friends in the student milieu making plans to come to demos with these intentions for the first time, but also probably involved many people coming by themselves. The tension that could be felt against the police during the strike initially mostly only manifested itself in chance, but over time this transformed into the more empowering practice of attacking police directly, and as more and more people took this up, it snowballed into being normalized.
And what are some of the tactical lessons learned from that period?
When we look at the confrontation with police that we've seen here, it can basically be broken down into two things. Confrontation that frees up space from the police, and confrontation that doesn't have the force to make police retreat, but is still valuable, obviously. From what I've seen, the factors that make projectile attacks, for instance, capable of winning this space are coordination and widespread participation, with an offensive mentality that doesn't wait for police to attack us first. This is how fear changes camps, avoiding the cycle of police inevitably attacking the demo and dispersing it as everyone runs from police charges. In Montreal, the courage to confront police is already held by many people, but often the level of self-organization is not quite developed enough to make these confrontations long-lasting. Something that some anarchists quickly realized was that if we want to hold the streets after things start to get wild, projectiles must be collected as soon as possible. During the demos with a more militant tone, like March 15th, the night demos, the Book Fair weekend, April 25th, May Day, and others, within the first 10 minutes you would see crews running into alleys or gardens to collect rocks in side bags, or using hammers to ply rocks up from the street, or smashing the larger pieces into throwable sizes on the sidewalk. People who had collected rocks would then distribute them amongst the masked portion of the demo. Something that also started to happen more often was people counting down before throwing, so that instead of just one or two rocks actually connecting with police, there were volleys that could make police retreat. Another tactic to accompany rock throwing that has been used pretty extensively is throwing paint bombs, but these often have a limited effect unless aimed well enough to hit a visor. I've seen this happen only once. Fire extinguishers filled with paint, on the other hand, as seen in Oakland during the general strike, are the perfect weapon against police. With one swoosh, you can blind an entire riot cop line and take them out for as long as it takes them to clear their visors. The same goes for police vehicle front windshields. Fireworks are also often shot at police lines, but the few times boat flares have been used, they have been far more effective than fireworks. It's also really important for undercovers and corporate media to be fought out of the demo as soon as things start to get rowdy, to make it safer to eventually disperse and demask. And finally, wearing black socks over shoes and ditching them with everything else can save you a lot of trouble. So can wearing cotton gloves. Yep, that's about it.
Thanks, Nick. And that was it for this edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. As always, this here labor of love and rage is brought to you by slaves who share their fiat currency so that we can keep the lights on. So muchas motherfucking gracias to Jason, Samantha, Katie, Kaylin, Fiona, Regina, Danielle, Patrick, Miguel, Gavin, Adrian, Tim, Angela, Thomas, Preston's Productions, Rosemary, Tom, Alexander, Gregory, One Brain, Jimmy, Dylan, Christian, Kyle, Valentin, Francois, Alyssa, Jennifer, Liam, Richard, Justin, James, Robin, Chris, Aaron, Micah, Stephen, Sean, Serena, Patrick, Limilum, FG, Bruce, and Stephen Pozole. I also want to give a warm welcome to the newest members of the Ta Conspiracy, Ashley, Amelia, and Justine. Bienvenidas. For links to information about militant street tactics, just visit my fucking website, stimulator.tv. And to quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War, the ultimate skill is to take up a position where you are formless. If you are formless, the most penetrating spies will not be able to discern you, or the wisest counsels will not be able to do calculations against you. See you in the streets.
Faire valser le décor, je veux dégraisser le corps, puis redresser les chines, inverser la vapeur et voir la peur changer de